Hey, I'd like to welcome you to another episode of Mission Matters. My name is Adam Torres, and if you'd like to apply to be a guest on the show, just head on over to missionmatters.com and click on Be Our Guest to apply. All right, so today I have Jane Oates on the line, and she's a senior policy advisor over at Working Nation. Today's episode with Jane is part of our Milken Global Conference coverage series, where we bring you the best of attendees, of VIPs, of speakers, of panelists, all the above that were at the conference. First thing first, Jane, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Adam, so much.
All right, Jane. So we got a lot to talk about today. So we're going to get into the impact of economic conditions on the workforce, i.e., where are the jobs? So we'll get into that. We'll get into, what you think job growth is going to look like, and really just thinking about examples of education and training programs that are getting people placed in quality jobs. But before we get into that, I'd like to start off with the Milken Global Conference. I know you were there this year. Have you been in the past? Is this the first time? Like talk to me on how you originally got introduced to the conference.
Yeah, and not my first time. I was introduced by the Working Nation CEO, Art Bilger, who started in his professional career with Mike Milken at Drexel Burnham. So I've been to the conference. Yeah, and so I've gotten to know Mike Milken a bit and all the Drexel folks through Art, and probably I would say fifth or sixth time at the conference, but everyone is unique, and this year was spectacular. I mean, really deep dives on the economy, and on the flip side of that, really warm and wonderful sessions with people like Jason Sudeikis, who talked about kindness. So you go to that conference and you get the who's who of the economy, and also like a sweet taste of some other things. Every time I've been there, there's been an example of, kind of non-economic stuff that just like tears your heart. And Jason Sudeikis didn't disappoint this year.
If you recall, I know you've been going for, you said 5 or 6 times you've been. When was the first time you went? Do you remember? If not, no big deal. Not to put you on the spot.
I want to say probably 2018. I can figure this out because I'm thinking when I started with Working Nation. I think 18 was my first time.
Wow, that's amazing. And the reason I asked that, by the way, is you're a veteran here in terms of this. I interviewed some newbies that were there for the first time, but I've been there now going on. I think this will be my 4th year, 3rd or 4th year, one of the two. And
well, you're a veteran too.
Well, yes, but the build up, and every year it gets bigger and bigger. The community gets bigger, not just number of attendees, but just I'm like, God, geez, can they get any more? Can they get any better? It feels like you're in an island, in my opinion, and with all these amazing, cool things, and just the brain candy of knowledge and things that you can do. What have you, from the build up since you first started going, what keeps you coming back?
So, I love his commitment to healthcare and healthcare innovation, and I always go to many of those sessions. But, he hits on your interest, whatever your interests are. At their conference, it was the first time I really did a deep dive on employee-owned companies. Leonard Green was doing it at that time, and nobody else. That was probably 5 or 6 years ago. Nobody else was doing it. I love the way he talks about second chance hiring. He always has something going around that, populations that are facing particular barriers to employment. And then at the other end of the spectrum, he has the best investment tip people in the world. So you get so to me, it really, you get to see some of the topics and some of the people that are speaking that you're a fangirl of, but then you meet new people there, and so much, like every conference, so much of the excitement is in the hallways and in the interaction. But they build that in, that whole section where they build out the garden room kind of thing. You get to really sit and talk to really interesting people that you would never get the ability to be elbow to elbow with somewhere else.
Yeah, I love it. Some other people, I'm not going to take credit for this, some other people that I interviewed mentioned, so I like to say it's the Super Bowl for me every year. I had some other people say
Yeah.
it was like the Disneyland of conferences. I'm like, oh my gosh. And I think the fun part is what you mentioned too, is sometimes like going outside of your, I don't know if I should say comfort zone, but like area of interest or expertise. So I had some finance people that are like, oh, heavy into finance all day long, but I wanted to get into some longevity stuff and like other things and vice versa. And so it's kind of like this little playground of let's go see, because anything that you watch is going to be like top level. It's going to be vetted. They're going to be like the best in their industry. Doesn't matter where you go. So you can't really lose.
I totally agree. I mean, going to Los Angeles is a trek for a lot of people, and it's an expensive ticket item. It's a high ticket item, but boy, I'll tell you, I would give up 3 conferences to go to that one, only because it's really innovative. You really see innovation, and he's very likely, and I think he has a heavy hand in planning this. I don't think he just arrives that day, and he being Mike Milken, but he'll have people on the stage who really have never been on a stage together before sometimes, and it's really interesting. Not explosive, but authentic.
And that's funny that you say that. Nobody else has brought that up really, to where it's like normally the panels are, should I use the word friendly? I mean, and you're right, not explosive, but people will openly, no, I don't agree with that, or blah, blah, obviously in a very respectful way. And you'll be like, and I'll be in the audience like, oh, it's getting good. Where's my popcorn?
That's exactly right. It's great, and you can go to everything. I mean, there are very few things that are limited audience. I mean, you go to some of these conferences, and half of the agenda, you have to be a partner in a business, or you have to be related to one of the sponsors to go. This is really a pretty little D democratic conference.
Yeah, but thank you for that. And let's switch it up a bit. So I do want to get into Working Nation. First off, maybe start off by telling us a little bit about the organization, please.
Well, it's an exciting time for Working Nation. Working Nation is 10 years old and was started by the gentleman I mentioned, Art Bilger. And, 10 years ago, nobody was talking in the workforce and education space about telling your story. And he really said, that the job market was changing for the better or worse. It was changing. And people didn't know where to go to get the skills that they needed to really be qualified for jobs that were being developed. So he started this nonprofit media company 10 years ago, with hiring, myself excluded, hiring like the best talent you could imagine to make videos, to do written articles, to do a podcast, and to all of us did a lot of speaking at conferences to really get the word out about what are the characteristics of a successful training and education program, and who are some of the players, and call them out by name. Now, it was an expensive endeavor, and Art really did a lot of the funding of it. We had generous funding from foundations. But, we sat down probably a year ago and said, how do you scale this? And the answer was really very difficult, because we would tell, 100 stories a year, but there are thousands of stories out there, and there were communities that we were missing. So this year, Art decided to donate all of our video content to Jobs for the Future, and they're going to actually develop a studio where they'll help local programs tell their own story. Learn how to write an op-ed, learn how, with the iPhones, the smartphones, you can take your own video and make your own sizzle reel to let people know the good outcomes that you're getting. So Working Nation, as of September, won't do any more original content. Everything will be done through this partnership with the studio at Jobs for the Future.
Wow, what an amazing story. And speaking of jobs, what do you think? I mean, the economy is tightening. What are your predictions for job growth?
Look, I think job growth is really on a track with some clarity about tariffs, because you talk about some of the particular sectors, transportation and logistics, construction, manufacturing. They're really like on pins and needles waiting for the final, verdict, and maybe it'll come August 1st now, on tariffs and how expensive things will be, because they don't know how to price their goods. So I think those sectors particularly are going to be flat for the next few months until we get some clarity. I think we're going to continue to see incredible job growth with healthcare, and new jobs. People think doctors and nurses, but health IT, all of that stuff, all of the allied health positions, they're growing like crazy. partly because, many more people have health care than they have in the past, partly because the population is aging. And we all know that the, disproportionate amount of health care attention happens post 50 when, you have to have all these routine things done. So I think healthcare is going to continue to grow. I think education is going to continue to grow. I'm really excited about some of the new models like registered apprenticeships for teachers, where you can go from being a teaching aide to a teacher with minimal coursework and having all of your work experience count. So I'm excited about that. Oddly, we saw last month the weirdest thing we've ever seen in the numbers, where ADP, the private sector payroll company, saw a relative job loss of 33,000, and yet when the BLS numbers came out, we were plus 130,000. So that's a weird anomaly. I think that we're going to suffer over the next several months still from the federal job cuts, and people think think of obviously first of all and foremost of federal workers, but they forget federal contractors. So all the contracts that have been dropped by the federal government, think of every name whether it's Deloitte or whether it's Accenture, whether it's Boeing or whether it's Lockheed Martin, they're all federal contractors. And if their contracts get cut, they cut people. So we're going to see a lot of volatility, I would say, in the next few months.
Well, let's go further into the examples of education and training programs. You mentioned one with the teachers, I believe, or is that a new change? And go a little bit further into that. I'm just curious from how people are getting placed in quality jobs.
Yeah, look, in the teacher role, you've always had to go to a traditional teacher college and get a 4-year baccalaureate degree. And even if you were working in a K-12 school district, you had to go back to the very beginning, even though you had been a teacher's aide or a non-teaching aide and knew a lot about education. These registered apprenticeships allow you to accelerate and maybe not take 4 years to get the bachelor's degree that you're required to for the license. And like every other registered apprenticeship program, you are paid while you're learning. So they continue their job as a teacher's aide while they're taking courses. And some really forward-thinking districts have really put skin in the game. Like they have paid for part of the tuition for those employees. I think it's going to be a model that stays and really grows. I think that covers an untraditional registered apprenticeship program, but we all know that they've existed forever in manufacturing and construction. But the growth of them in other sectors is really interesting, and it'll be interesting to see if healthcare adopts that kind of model too, very similar to education. Yeah, it'll be because look, a lot of people don't want to work in a hospital that may be a charity care hospital, maybe in a tough neighborhood, just like teaching. So how do you incent people to stay there? So I'm excited about that. And I'll tell you, I'll give you two models that I love that are out of the apprenticeship place. You've probably heard of Perscolas. Perscolas started in New York, but is now all over the place. And they take anybody, they take anybody who's willing to learn and train them in new technologies. And they have a direct partnership with employers so that they're training for the specific technologies that the employer has open jobs for. This is, of course it's successful because people leave the training program successfully and then they get placed immediately into a job with one of these employers who they've worked with to know that there's a job opening. That to me has to be the key to training programs from now into forever. That the training has to be in direct partnership with an employer or a group of employers who have the skill sets for specific jobs that are open and in demand, and people can move right from training into them. That's going to be the way of success to me. Training, the old model of train and pray is dead.
Yeah, I see that. And what's interesting, too, is when you think about shortages in these industries, I feel like there will be more and more that come about. Because if we think about, and this is beyond the context of this conversation, obviously we could spend a day on this one, but if we think about the way some of the higher education system evolved versus once upon a time more of an apprenticeship model. And let's talk like way back when, right? From pre-industrial revolution or something. When you're talking about we're all farmers for the most part, right? Like it was a whole different setup, and we learned on the job and we're an apprentice, and then we grew, and then we became really specialized in these different niches. So I can see that. Like if somebody's already been working in the school system, there's a huge workforce there that just aren't able to be teachers because they can't, for whatever reason in their life, they can't just stop and then go back and go through all these years of school
That's right.
Get back to work, to get back basically to where they're already at. For some people, obviously I'm generalizing, and I can see that being in many other fields where maybe a piece of paper and some credentials and some additional tooling and education were needed to make them be able to do the job, but they're possibly closer than if they hadn't been in that system already working. I see it. It makes total
exactly
sense.
Right. And they have empathy already for the children.
Yeah. And they want to be there. Yeah, they want to be there.
They want to be there. That's exactly right. They love the neighborhood. They're culturally competent. And,
they live there.
They live there.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when you live in a community, you feel differently about the urgency of making sure that the next generation in that community are educated. I really believe that's true.
Yeah. I agree with that, and I also think that just the level of pride and other things to be there and to get that increase in pay and recognition and all those things. I mean, I think they all play into it, and I think that ultimately uplifts the community. So I think it's a great idea. Mm-hmm. Jane, this has been fun. How are you feeling?
This is really fun. Really fun, Adam. Thank you.
Well, hey, first off, I appreciate you coming on today and connecting and being part of this Milken Conference Global Coverage Series that we're doing. And if somebody wants to follow up, they want to follow your work, they want to learn more about Working Nation, how do they do that?
So Working Nation is still up and running. WorkingNation.org is the website. They can read the past work. They can see the past work and see everything. And then as they transition, as we transition full-time into JFF Studios, then we'll have that information on our own website. Me personally, you can read my thoughts that are not necessarily always aligned with Working Nations, mostly on LinkedIn. Jane Oates is on LinkedIn, Oates.
Wonderful. And for everybody listening, just so you know, we'll definitely put some links in the show notes so that you can just click on the links and head right on over and check out Jane, check out Working Nation. And speaking of the audience, if this is your first time with Mission Matters and you haven't done it yet, hit that subscribe or follow button. This is a daily show. Each and every day we're bringing you new content, new ideas, and hopefully new inspiration to help you along the way on your journey as well. So again, hit that subscribe or follow button. And Jane, thanks again for coming on the show.
Thank you, Adam. It was great. Thanks very much.